On the evening of May 1st, cameras at a local Dollarama caught 6-year-old Lilly and 4-year-old Jack Sullivan with their mother Malehya Brooks Murray and stepfather Daniel Martell. Ordinary footage, nothing strange, nothing hurried. It was the last confirmed moment the children were seen alive. By the next morning, May 2nd at 10 a.m., they were gone. Between those hours lies a silence no one has been able to fill. Police call it the window of disappearance, 12 hours when every timeline breaks. Malehya said she tucked the children in around 10 that night and went to bed. Daniel told investigators he went to bed early and didn't wake until it was light, but while the house slept, something changed. When the sun rose, the beds were empty and the door was open to the woods beyond the yard. RCMP investigators focused on that gap, the space between the last goodnight and the first call for help. In modern cases, the truth often hides in devices, not diaries. That's how they found the first digital clue, a phone app called TextPlus. Malehya told them she'd used it to contact her mother and grandmother because Wi-Fi worked better than her cell signal. Then she deleted it completely. Deletion is rarely random. Every removed app leaves a timestamp, a heartbeat in reverse. Detectives asked why erase something that might prove she'd tried to reach family. Malehya said simply, "I didn't need it anymore." RCMP didn't argue. They filed a data access order to the US-based TextPlus servers, asking for her records between May 1st and 2nd, the exact span of those silent hours. Weeks later, the results arrived. What they contained remains hidden behind heavy black lines in the public files, but one phrase survived the redactions. Information could identify further investigational avenues. In plain language, it mattered. Somewhere inside those logs was activity worth following, a digital whisper inside the night everyone thought was quiet. Maybe it was a call for help, maybe it was nothing at all. But investigators began comparing the TextPlus timestamps to every other trace from that night: neighbor statements, router pings, polygraph interviews. Because if data moved when people said they didn't, then the mystery of Lilly and Jack Sullivan might begin, not in the woods outside their home, but in the deleted code of an app their mother said she no longer needed it. It began quietly, in a rural corner of Nova Scotia where nights are long and signals fade. On the evening of May 1st, surveillance cameras inside a Dollarama store captured 6-year-old Lilly Sullivan and her 4-year-old brother Jack with their mother Malehya Brooks Murray and stepfather Daniel Martell. They were shopping, laughing, paying at the counter, just an ordinary errand. It was also the final verified image of the children. After that moment, the public record turns blank. Police files show no other sightings, no neighbors awake, no doorbell cameras online. At home that night, Malehya said she put both children to bed around 10 p.m. She told investigators they were safe, tucked under blankets, the house locked. Daniel added that he went to sleep early and didn't wake until daylight. Between those statements lies the void that investigators still call the silent hours. By 10 a.m. on May 2nd, Malehya was on the phone to the RCMP. Her voice, according to transcripts, was steady but panicked. She said the children were gone and she feared they had wandered off into the woods. Patrols arrived within minutes. They searched the yard, the ditches, the small trail that cut through the trees behind the property. Nothing. Within days, search teams expanded outward: volunteers, dogs, drones, and divers. They combed every stream and culvert. Each new area ended the same way: no tracks, no clothing, no sign of life. The working theory stayed simple: to curious children lost in a rough country. But time erodes simple stories. By the third week, investigators began looking inward, not outward. Something about the timeline felt too clean. Every modern disappearance eventually becomes digital. Phones, routers, apps, they are the new witnesses. When the RCMP collected the family's devices, one small detail stood out. On Malehya's phone was an entry for an internet calling app called TextPlus. It had been installed, used briefly, then deleted. She volunteered the information herself, explaining she used it because Wi-Fi was more reliable than her cell service. "I called my mother and my grandmother after the kids went missing," she said. "Then I deleted it. I didn't need it anymore." Detectives wrote those words down. "I didn't need it anymore." To a mother who had just lost two children, that sounded strange, but grief speaks in fragments, and investigators didn't press her then. Instead, They noted the deletion time and filed for a judicial production order to TextPlus Inc. in the United States. The warrant specified one window, May 1st to May 2nd, nothing before, nothing after, just the missing hours. Weeks later, the data arrived in Halifax, connection logs, user identifiers, timestamps. The publicly released version of that report is nearly unreadable, blacked out line after line. Yet one surviving sentence appears in both the affidavit and the search warrant summary. Information could identify further investigational avenues. In the cautious language of police files, that means we found something we can't explain yet. Analysts began overlaying those times on the physical timeline. One entry, its content still redacted, occurred shortly after midnight. Another, hours later, near 3 a.m., both fell squarely inside the window when Malehya and Daniel said they were asleep. To investigators, that difference between human memory and machine record was impossible to ignore. Still, data without context proves little. A background process, an automatic update, even a failed connection attempt could create a timestamp. RCMP specialists checked other devices in the house, the router, Daniel's phone, a shared tablet. No abnormal traffic appeared, only Malehya's TextPlus account had moved in the dark. When questioned again, she stood by her story. She said she had tried calling her family that morning, not overnight, and that any midnight activity must have been automatic. The investigators logged her explanation, but they knew something else. Deletion itself has a timestamp too. The TextPlus app was removed mid-afternoon on May 3rd, barely 24 hours after the report. Before forensics could image her phone, the traces of message content were gone. 2 digital examiners. That erasure transformed the app from background detail to central mystery. Why delete a program that might hold your outgoing calls? Was it routine cleanup or fear of misunderstanding? They couldn't ask the app. They could only reconstruct fragments from the company's servers. Every byte they recovered went into what the RCMP called the communications reconstruction file. Inside that file, each action is marked in seconds: installation, login, connection, removal. Read together, they form a heartbeat. Install, evening, use, short bursts, delete, after the search begins. It was a pattern too deliberate to dismiss, yet too faint to accuse. In an interview summary, one officer wrote, "Activity inconsistent with stated behavior, significance undetermined." As public attention turned to louder clues, the witnesses who heard a car, the endless searches in the woods, the technical team kept tracing the silent hours. They synchronized the TextPlus timestamps with power grid data and neighborhood Wi-Fi scans. The goal was to see if any other device woke up when the app did. None did. The house was otherwise still. What investigators faced was a modern kind of contradiction. A mother who says she slept, a phone that says it didn't. The difference might mean nothing or everything. Without message content, they could not know who was on the other end of that digital pulse. If it was a relative, it would confirm her story. If it was another number, it could rewrite the timeline entirely. The RCMP kept their findings sealed. When portions of the file were later released to media, those sections were the darkest on the page. Even the names of the analysts were redacted. The reason, officials said, was to protect ongoing investigative integrity. To the public, that sounded like a wall. To detectives, it was a doorway still waiting to be opened. By midsummer, the TextPlus records had become one of 2 pillars holding up the Sullivan investigation. The other was the mysterious vehicle heard in the valley. Both belonged to the same stretch of night, both unproven, both undeniable. One was sound without signal, the other, signal without sound. The RCMP's challenge was to make them speak to each other. So far, they haven't. 6 months on, the official statement remains unchanged. The investigation continues. Behind that simplicity lies a maze of unanswered questions. Did the app connect to someone that night? Was it a call for help? Or just another ghost in the data, like so many that haunt modern cases? In the end, what Malehya's deleted app might reveal isn't guilt or innocence, it's how easily truth can vanish in the space between intention and information. The hours are still silent, but the silence is full of code waiting to be read. The TextPlus records gave investigators their first real pulse inside the missing hours. 2 unexplained bursts of activity, both during the time when the house should have been asleep. They were small, fleeting milliseconds of connection, but enough to raise an impossible question. If everyone was resting, who was using the phone? To find out, RCMP analysts began building what they called a convergence matrix, a layered chart where digital and physical events could be stacked side by side. On one layer sat the witness testimonies about the vehicle, on another, the TextPlus pings. A third contained the polygraph results from Malehya and Daniel. The purpose was simple: if any of those lines overlapped, the story might start to align. The first overlay surprised them. The initial TextPlus activity occurred roughly within the same hour the neighbors, Brad Wang and Justin Smith, reported hearing a vehicle. The second spike matched the time they said the car stopped and returned one last time. The probability of such a clean overlap by chance was low, but coincidences are plentiful in cold cases. Police refused to speculate publicly. Inside the lab, however, the correlation was noted in bright orange ink: possible linkage between auditory reports and digital connection. Verification pending. That phrase would later appear, half-erased, in the redacted warrant documents released to the media. As digital analysts combed through the logs, another layer emerged. A secondary file listed the source network for each connection. The TextPlus data had been transmitted through the family's home Wi-Fi, not cellular data, meaning the device never left the property. If that was true, then either the car was imaginary or the phone stayed behind while someone else drove. The RCMP didn't comment, but they quietly re-interviewed the witnesses. Wang repeated that the sound came directly from the direction of the Sullivan house. Smith insisted he saw the reflection of headlights over the tree line. Both men stood by their statements. Neither could explain how the car could move if the phone didn't. Around the same time, the USB recording entered the investigation. Patty Pearson, the children's great-grandmother, had already turned it over to police weeks earlier. In it, a relative named Darren Geddes claimed he knew what happened and mentioned that vehicle they used. Investigators had dismissed it at first as a rumor. But now, with the TextPlus timeline echoing the witnesses' accounts, the file took on new weight. Forensic technicians examined the USB metadata again. They discovered the file had been created on June 21, long after the disappearance, but the conversation referred to events back in May, when the car kept going out. The phrasing was uncanny, almost identical to what Wang had told police. How Geddes knew that detail remains unknown. He later admitted it might be speculation. Still, investigators could not ignore the repetition. They charted every mention of vehicles in the USB transcript against the sound reports and the TextPlus activity. 3 separate clues, one auditory, one digital, one verbal, now occupied the same stretch of time. Yet none confirmed the others. The RCMP described it as a triangle of uncertainty. Inside the Major Crimes Unit, opinions split. Some believed the TextPlus activity was merely the app reconnecting automatically when Wi-Fi flickered. Others argued that it matched human behavior: brief logins, then silence, like someone sending or checking a message. Without message content, there was no way to decide. The company's privacy restrictions prevented retrieval of deleted texts without additional warrants. Meanwhile, the public learned fragments of this debate through media leaks. Headlines asked, "Was there a midnight message?" The RCMP responded by tightening their information policy. Only one official statement was allowed: "We continue to explore all technological evidence." It was a careful phrase that meant we can neither confirm nor deny what we found. Behind the scenes, investigators cross-checked the router's DHCP logs, the list of devices that connected to the home network overnight, only to show activity: Malehya's phone and the family's smart TV, which automatically refreshed its system clock at 3:01 a.m. The phone's connection lasted longer, almost 4 minutes. What it did in that time remains redacted. For the next several weeks, analysts ran signal strength simulations, recreating how Wi-Fi coverage reached the yard. They wanted to know if a device could stay connected even if someone walked outside or into a vehicle parked close to the house. The answer was yes. A phone left inside a pocket or purse could maintain a weak link for several meters beyond the door. The discovery kept the car theory alive, but every new piece of data added complexity instead of clarity. If the phone had stayed within range, the signal explained nothing. If it had moved, why had the router still logged it locally? Investigators debated latency, buffer times, and signal bounce. Each explanation felt like the right one until the next test disproved it. When RCMP summarized their findings in a year-end report, the language was cautious: no evidence of external access or unauthorized usage detected. Activity consistent with device in proximity to the home network. Relevance to disappearance undetermined. The phrasing effectively said everything and nothing at once. While technicians argued over data, field investigators re-examined the human side. They asked Malehya again about the TextPlus deletion. Her answer never changed. I deleted it because I didn't need it anymore. When pressed about the timing, she grew quiet. I was overwhelmed, she said. I didn't think about keeping anything. To forensic officers, that explanation sounded genuine and painfully common. Families often delete or reset phones after tragedies, trying to erase painful reminders, yet the timing still troubled them. The app disappeared less than 2 days after the search began, before investigators had a chance to ask for a full download. Intentional or not, the result was the same, a digital gap that could never be closed. Meanwhile, the USB recording continued to cast its shadow. Geddes had gone public under the alias Durwood O'Grady, giving an online interview where he repeated the same claims. Could be wrong, he said. Could be speculation. The RCMP logged the video as potential misinformation, but kept it archived in case any details matched sealed evidence. A few dead phrases about the car and the early morning, whether coincidence or leak, no one could tell. By autumn, investigators had exhausted most technical leads. They returned to the silent hours with one remaining question: did the phone's activity reflect movement or emotion? Was it a mother reaching out in panic before dawn or a random machine waking up to no one? The official summary for that phase ends with a single paragraph. Correlation between communication logs, witness statements, and family accounts remains inconclusive. Digital evidence provides indications but no definitive sequence of events. Investigation ongoing. In simpler words, the machine spoke, but no one could yet translate what they were saying. The TextPlus app had been deleted, but its shadow still moved inside the data. The USB recording spoke of vehicles, but its speaker retracted every claim. The neighbors heard an engine, but no camera confirmed it. Together, they formed the anatomy of uncertainty, the story of a night that refuses to resolve. 6 months later, the RCMP statement remains the same. The disappearance of Lilly and Jack Sullivan is an active investigation. No charges, no closure, just silence measured in bytes. And somewhere inside that silence, perhaps between 2 redacted lines in a server log, the truth of those missing hours still waits. By the time the technical reports came back, the Sullivan investigation had split in 2. On one side were the machines, routers, phones, USBs, each offering tiny, perfect memories. On the other were the people, tired, frightened, and contradictory. The data never lied, but the humans never agreed. Malehya Brooks Murray withdrew first. She stopped returning calls from reporters, stopped answering door knocks. In her only brief statement, she said she trusted the RCMP and wanted privacy to heal. To detectives, her quiet wasn't guilt. It was exhaustion, but in the echo chamber of public attention, silence became suspicion. Daniel Martell took the opposite path. He spoke, again and again. He told the Canadian press he was tired of rumors, that the vehicle never moved, and that he prayed for the children every night. He had passed the polygraph and cooperated with every search, yet online forums picked apart his quotes word by word, turning each defense into a new accusation. Inside the family, the tension deepened. The USB recording had been meant to protect Patty Pearson's credibility, but once police entered it into evidence, it did the opposite. Relatives argued about who knew what and when. Darren Geddes, the voice on the recording, accused Patty of betrayal for handing it over. Malehya cut contact with both. To investigators, family fracture isn't irrelevant. It changes how memories form. People in conflict remember differently. One RCMP psychologist wrote, "Under stress, truth splinters into versions that all sound real." In the Sullivan case, the data was supposed to settle those versions, yet the data itself was fragmented. Public interest stayed hungry. When media organizations won access to the less redacted investigation files, the story reignited. Headlines focused on one sentence buried in the warrants. Information could identify further investigational avenues. To readers, it sounded like a breakthrough. To detectives, it meant nothing more than "we're still guessing." The RCMP's communication unit issued a measured response. The investigation remains active and ongoing. No further details can be released at this time. It was a single sentence built to end questions, and it failed. Reporters kept calling, asking if the TextPlus logs matched the witness vehicle statements. Officers replied, "We cannot comment on specific evidence." Behind closed doors, the team kept working. They fed the TextPlus timestamps into their timeline software, overlaying them with the USB metadata and neighbor statements. The more they mapped, the clearer one pattern became. Every major clue sat inside the same 6-hour void. It was as if time itself had shrunk to one question. That pattern haunted them. It meant the truth was not spread across weeks of evidence but trapped in a single night no one could reconstruct. Every call, every sound, every erased message belonged to that same window between midnight and sunrise. For the digital team, the work was clinical: hash values, time zones, network jitter. For the field detectives, it was deeply personal. They had walked the woods around the Sullivan house, seen the empty beds, spoken to a mother who still left the porch light on. They could measure data, but they couldn't measure grief. By late summer, analysts and investigators met for a joint briefing. The summary was short: no physical or digital evidence to indicate criminal act. All avenues remain open. That line would be quoted for months. It meant everything and nothing. Outside that meeting room, rumors thrived. Online theorists suggested that Malehya's deleted app hid messages to unknown contacts. Others claimed Daniel had removed data from the family tablet. RCMP checked, none true. But in a case with no body and no suspect, absence is an open invitation for imagination. Inside the RCMP, officers began to speak about the case as a mirror. It showed how 21st century truth is both abundant and fragile. Every digital trace survives forever, yet meaning evaporates almost instantly. The TextPlus logs were numbers on a screen, real but soulless. Malehya's memories were emotionless. Between them lay a gap no forensic tool could bridge. Daniel continued living at the house for months, maintaining the property as searches came and went. He told a reporter, "I don't want to move until they come home." The quote ran once, then faded from the headlines. Hope doesn't trend as well as doubt. Meanwhile, the RCMP digital unit developed a routine. Every few weeks they rescanned the TextPlus records, cross-referencing with new data sets from Google, Meta, and telecom providers. They found nothing new but refused to close the loop. One investigator called it searching for a heartbeat in a frozen file. By the 6th month, the technical analysis was largely complete. No new anomalies, no missing pings, just the same two spikes in the dark. They remained unexplained, and therefore vital. Sometimes, in investigations, what you can't explain becomes the compass you follow. Officers compiled their final report for the year. Digital forensic avenues remain open pending future technological advancements. In other words, they were hoping that one day newer tools could extract what current software couldn't. Even the machines would need to get smarter to interpret the Sullivan silence. At the bottom of that file, a note handwritten by a senior officer simply reads, "Sometimes the truth is there. We just haven't invented the right way to hear it yet." And so the search continues, not only for missing children but for a language that can translate grief into data and data back into truth. 6 months had passed since the call that started everything. In police terms, that's an eternity. In family time, it's the blink of an eye. The Sullivan investigation now lived in two worlds, one made of screens and timestamps, the other of faces that had grown tired from waiting. Officers called it an open file. To the parents, it was a wound that refused to close. The RCMP's major crime unit in Bible Hill prepared its quarterly report. The first line read, "Active investigation. Digital analysis complete, pending new information." It meant the same thing it had meant for months: no leads, no closure. Still, analysts kept checking the same fragments: the TextPlus logs, the USB metadata, the witness statements. They knew that somewhere inside repetition, meaning sometimes appears. At the same time, the investigators who had walked through the family's home began to talk quietly about what the case had done to them. Forensic science trains people to look for proof. This case taught them how to sit with absence. One constable compared it to listening to static for a voice that never comes back. For Malehya, absence became a kind of armor. She no longer spoke publicly. Friends said she spent most days at her mother's house, rarely using her phone. When reporters tried to reach her, Calls went unanswered. "She's done talking," one relative told a local paper. "Every word she says just becomes another theory." Daniel Martell, by contrast, stayed visible but weary. He still lived at the Lansdowne Station property, still turned on the porch light each night. To neighbors, he looked like a man caught between defiance and despair. When asked if he believed the children were still alive, he paused. "I have to," he said. "Otherwise, what am I doing here?" Police continued to monitor online chatter about the case. False leads surfaced weekly as supposed sightings, anonymous tips, claims of secret messages hidden in the redacted files. Each one consumed hours of manpower, then collapsed under verification. In their internal notes, investigators called these noise events. The irony was painful. After months chasing silence, now they were drowning in noise. Inside the RCMP's data lab, the team revisited the original TextPlus logs one last time. They confirmed again what they already knew: 2 connection events, no content. The servers had overwritten the temporary message caches long ago. There would be no recovering what was said, if anything was said at all. What remained were only times, cold, perfect numbers that meant nothing without context. The USB recording, too, had reached a dead end. Geddes, the man on the call, refused further interviews. He told officers he was done being part of this. His online alias disappeared, his videos were taken down. Without his cooperation, the recording was just a voice captured in speculation, a theory preserved in digital amber. In September, the RCMP held a private case review meeting. The minutes are brief. No evidence of foul play established. No evidence excluding foul play established. Case status: active unsolved. It was the bureaucratic way of saying we don't know. For families, unsolved sounds like forever. For investigators, it simply means not yet. Files like these can reopen years later, when technology catches up, new signal triangulation tools, improved AI forensics, fresh witnesses. But until that day, the Sullivan disappearance remains frozen between possibility and proof. The community around Lansdowne Station slowly returned to its routines. The Dollarama where the last footage was captured kept playing soft pop music through its speakers. Shoppers walked the same aisles where the children once stood with their mother. Nothing in the store had changed, except that now people looked a little longer at the security cameras overhead. In quiet moments, officers involved in the case still replayed the timeline in their heads. May 1st to 14 p.m., the Dollarama footage. Midnight, the possible TextPlus ping. 1 a.m., the witnesses hearing a car. 3 a.m., another digital spike. 10 a.m., the call to police. That sequence, simple on paper, has become a riddle that no one can solve. One detective later described it best: every fact is true, and they can't all be true at the same time. For Malehya, truth became a private language. She kept the original phones locked away, refused to replace them. Friends said she couldn't stand the idea of deleting anything else. "If they ever come back," she once said, "I want them to find me exactly where I was." Daniel, meanwhile, started writing down every memory of the last day he saw the kids, not to publish, but to remember in order. "If data can keep time," he said, "so can I." His notes filled an old binder with sketches of hours, shadows, the way the light looked through the window that night. A human counterpoint to the forensic timeline. The RCMP's final summary for that year ended with a single sentence typed in bold: "Without physical discovery, digital evidence remains interpretive." In other words, data can tell you when something happened, but never why. And that's the paradox at the heart of the silent hours. The truth exists somewhere between code and conscience, between what the devices remember and what the people can't forget. Every investigation tries to narrow that distance, few succeed. As winter settled over Nova Scotia, the file stayed open, waiting for something: a new witness, a new technology, a moment of chance. But the valley where the Sullivans lived had already learned how to live with mystery. The sound of engines on the gravel road no longer drew curtains. People simply listened, then went back to sleep. In that quiet landscape, the missing still linger. 2 children, a deleted app, a night of data that refuses to explain itself. The RCMP call it an ongoing matter. The rest of us call it what it feels like: the loudest silence in Canada. Every unsolved case begins with questions and ends with echoes. The files on Lilly and Jack Sullivan remain open, and the RCMP continues to review every clue, digital or otherwise. If you believe these silent hours still hold a message, stay with us. This is True Child Cases. Subscribe, share, and keep the search alive. Because the next clue may already be waiting, hidden between one deleted app and the truth no one can yet see.